I'm not alone in this. Millions of Europeans know that administration committed war crimes against the Serbians. Millions of them in Europe knew this. Well, why is there no discussion now about the war in Afghanistan? Why is there not even a mention of the war in Afghanistan? Why is there no discussion of the costs of the war in Afghanistan? After all, wars have bankrupted nations in the past. One could argue that the Iraq war bankrupted America. I know that the men on Wall Street were probably more responsible for the bankrupting of America. I would say Barney Frank single-handedly destroyed the American financial industry by undermining it, by forcing the banks to give loans to unqualified applicants. Unqualified applicants were given mortgages. You know, it's interesting, the word mortgage means death gauge. I remember when I was young and I signed my first mortgage. How old was I? I don't know, 29, 30. I don't remember. I don't remember the age. But I remember saying, I'm signing a 30-year mortgage, death gauge. And the reason that it was called a death gauge is because it was skewed out so that just about when you made your last payment, you dropped dead and your wife got the house, which is what happened, you know, in my father's generation. The men all died about when the last check went out. Then the women live another 30 years for free in the house. That's the way it was. So mortgage, death gauge, meant basically that you'd pay for your house for the rest of your life, but at the end of the life, the house would be free and clear. But you had to put down 20% to get a mortgage, a death gauge. You had to kill yourself to get that 20%. I worked all my life to get that 20%. Killed myself to get that 20%. I went to banks before it. I had 18%. No, can't give it to you. Then I wake up and I see that there are millions of people, illegal aliens, unqualified crack dealers buying fraudulent houses in crackdens all over America in order to make sure that the S&L vermin, the vermin in the S&L business, you want me to name a few? I want me to name a few S&L crooks. Would you like me to disclose their names and what they've done with their billions that they stole? Would you like a few names? Your hair will stand up. I'll name the banks, I'll name the groups that were involved in this Ponzi scheme, and I'll tell you who was the biggest donor to the ACLU, who was the biggest donor to these radical progressive groups. They are liberals who ran these banks. They bailed out a few years before it all crashed for billions of dollars. They have a name. They live in a certain place. They gave $9 million to the ACLU, millions of dollars to these progressive groups that are now putting us into the Nazi-fascist era. And they all consider themselves good liberals, and they put stars on their back. So this very collapse of capitalism is now being used to usher in a form of communist fascism in this country by funding the Soros-like groups like the ACLU and the others who want to put free speech out of business, and et cetera. It's a very, very dangerous time that we're in right now. So I bring it back to the first question today. I'm not in a very particularly good mood. Why are we in Afghanistan? I'm not in a lazy, happy mood like I was yesterday. I'm actually in a very angry, serious mood. My mood's changed. I'm a moody person. Forgive me. Forgive me for not being a flatline. Forgive me for not being a fraud like David Letterman. Forgive me for not being a fat slob with a golf club who thinks that his job is to be a happy talker every day for the Republican cause. Forgive me for not being wallbanger. Porn vanity. Forgive me for not being a pawn of the vein. San Fran Frico. Joey, you're on the Savage Nation.
Yes, sir, Dr. Savage. I believe the reason that we're in Afghanistan is military strategery. In order to hold back two of America's threats to our freedom, Iran being one and Russia being the other. If we surround Iran and be at the southern border of Russia, we could hold the enemy at bay.
Let me think about that. So Iran is our enemy now? I thought Iran was Obama's friend. Iran was in the axis of evil when evil Bush was in power. But now that the good progressive president has said Iran is his friend.
Yes, sir.
So why are we afraid of Iran? Aren't they a good friend of Obama? He did nothing when they imprisoned the democracy protesters, did he? What did Hillary Clinton do when they were being tortured and murdered and raped, which is apparently going on in Iran's secret jails right now? How come there's no discussion of it by the worms in the media?
Exactly. Yeah,
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe our military is in Afghanistan as a wedge against Iran. I mean, Iran could be wiped off the map pretty quickly, couldn't it? We don't need ground troops to take care of the nuclear threat from Iran. We have nuclear submarines. What the hell do they do? What are they useful for? What are we floating these behemoths around for? For training? Training for...
sir.
You could fire conventional munitions at Iran's nuclear facilities from submarines or from high-flying bombers. They wouldn't even know the planes were over their airspace, and they could knock out their entire nuclear industry without them even knowing where it came from. What do you mean ground troops? What kind of nonsense is this? We're not in the Napoleonic era. We've got intercontinental ballistic missiles that do not have to be nuclear armed. They could be conventionally armed. They could wipe out the nuclear industry in Iran. But we're not doing it, so I don't go for that. I don't think we're there for anything to do with Afghanistan or Russia at all. I don't believe it at all. I'd like to know why we are in Afghanistan. I'd like an answer to this question. I have no idea why we're there. Now, we know why the media is not reporting it, because they're liars and they're thieves and they're evil. Every last one of them is a frigging worm. I'm so angry at them. They walk around like they're so important, and everybody looks up to them. Their lousy, stinking newspapers are going broke because of their crappy journalism, because they won't do any research, because they cover for this evil administration. That's why they're going out of business. How could a little show like mine thrive without publicity if I was so bad? How is that possible? I have no publicity machine. I'm not part of a corporate structure. How does one man alone make a dent in this incredible geography of the media? How is it possible? Because the truth is the most powerful thing on earth. People still have something in them that responds to a truthful man. And you know that whether or not I hit the mark every time I am seeking the truth, you know that. And you know that there's very little left in this media you can count on. You know the politicians are not as trustworthy as your neighborhood prostitute. You know that. You know that most of the mainstream media worked for the Obama administration. You know that as well. So what's left for you? Internet, blogging, talk radio. The kings of freedom of speech. And now this administration is now going after talk radio, as we told you they would. They don't need the fairness doctrine. That's a head-on assault. Criminals like this don't do head-on assaults. Everything they do is undermined. They take your emails and then they use them against you to spy on you. And then they say they didn't do it. Then they have a low-life undertaker, that Gibbs. Gibbs should be thrown out. He should be tarred and feathered in that office. Verbally, of course. What a pile of paltry garbage when Major Garrett stood up to him over those emails. All right, but let's stick to what you can know about, which is the Afghanistan thing. Why are we there? Why are we there? Where is the anti-war movement? I don't know where it went. I'd like to know. Why are we in Afghanistan? San Francisco, KNEW. Bob, why are we in Afghanistan? Please tell us.
I think the defense industry benefits from it, and also I think the defense industry is also committing a Ponzi scheme in the process. That's my point.
No, what do you mean? Try to spell that out. What do you mean by making more bombs and bullets?
No, by profiting from it. Like they just get the money out of it from the politicians and from the U.S.
Well, all right, beware the government media complex. That's a pretty given guess. We understand that, but we just got through with a war that bankrupted America in Iraq. The people threw Bush out because of the war, amongst other things. The war was the big one. So now we have an anti-war president who's still at war. In fact, he just doubled the troops to Afghanistan. So why are we in Afghanistan? Doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up here. Something's wrong with the picture. John in New York, WOR, why are we in Afghanistan?
Mike, there's only one thing in Afghanistan. That call you had down the road...
I can't hear a word you're saying. I've asked my team to raise the volume. I'm going to have to go off the air because something's wrong technically. I can't hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, that caller down the road that you had mentioned it, and he hit it right on the money. We are there for drugs. Nothing else, nothing more. That whole region up there is no oil there. It is mountain, desert, and region. Senior George Bush understood that. The Clinton understood that. George Bush understood that. And now Barack understands that. Drugs, drugs, drugs. So over 5,000 soldiers dead for what? Drugs. So he shifts the troops out of Iraq, shifts them over there to protect the control of heroin and cocaine coming out of that region. So that
I can't believe that's the sole reason. They would never get away with it if it was that naked. Wouldn't the distinguished progressive journalists have caught that by now? Wouldn't all of the distinguished NPR journalists have caught that by now? After all, they're so intelligent. They're not shock jocks. They're serious journalists at NPR. How come they haven't caught on with that?
Well, because they don't want to talk about it. See, you got farmers there. They don't want them to grow anything else there. Well, they've been trying to get them for years to stop growing the cocaine in the poppy fields and start growing tomatoes and vegetables. But the farmers understand, no, the biggest money maker they can have coming out of that region is the cocaine and the heroin.
So, wait, let me back up. The Taliban are fundamentalist Muslims who did not want the opium grown. Is that correct?
Yes.
In addition to being throwbacks in terms of how they treated women,